But I'm writing her a ticket. An obvious ticket she can't afford. And so right at the end of the ticket, as the cops in here know, I'm signing my name and my serial number. And at that point, I paused. And I looked down at this depressed woman, still staring right through the steering wheel. And I looked down at her snotty-nosed kids, who were still, some of them, fighting and crying. Mom is completely shutting them out. And I looked down at her cruddy old car. And then I'm here to tell you, I looked at me. It was the most penetrating gaze I'd ever felt in my life. And I asked myself a few questions. I said, Mac, is there anything that you're doing here that's helping this family? Is there anything that you're doing here that's making this a better place to live? And ultimately, is there anything that you're doing here that's bringing honor to the badge you wear on your chest? Well, I knew the answer to all those questions, and I handed her back her license and registration. And I didn't say, ma'am, this is your lucky day. I'm such a great guy. You need to pat me on the back because I'm not going to give you this ticket. No. If I had given her an opportunity to do that, it would have only exacerbated my shame. I deserved nothing of the sort. And I took that ticket and drove 3 blocks back to the station. Never said a word to her. I've always wondered how long she waited for me to come back. You know? So, because I never told her she could leave, I never said a word. And maybe after 15 or 20 minutes, she finally got it that I had something else I had to go do. But I tore that ticket up into 1,000 pieces. I violated policy. And I hoped for the higher cause. But I really don't know what I was doing, except that I didn't like who I was. And the next day, briefing was at 3 o'clock. This was swing shift. And briefing was at 2:30. Patrol started at 3. I went to the city clerk's office at 2:15 before briefing, and I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't know what was leading me. I don't know what was directing me. All I know is I went to the city clerk's office and I asked her a question. Maybe you've heard this question posed across America right now, because there's an organization out there that is really paying a lot of attention called Oath Keepers. And I went into the city clerk's office and I said, did I take an oath when I started my job? And she said, yeah. And before I could even ask, she burned me a copy and handed it to me. And now I'm going to go quit my job. I'm serious. I was a liar and a hypocrite. Do you know that I signed this? I signed my name. I, Richard Ivan Mack, solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully uphold, defend, and obey the United States Constitution and the Constitution of Utah, just like every cop has promised and every sheriff in the state of Idaho or the state of Washington, same thing, just different states depending on where you're working. And I had never read either one in my life. I took that job, I took that oath so I could take a job. So I could go on high-speed pursuits and kick in doors and arrest drug dealers and investigate traffic accidents and be a shoulder to cry on. But I certainly didn't get that job or take that job to keep my word. A solemn, sacred oath. And so right now, I'm literally taking off the badge, off my blue uniform, and going to the chief's office and letting him know that I will no longer participate in this line of work. And then this little blonde girl flashed in front of my eyes. I married her about 10 years before that. And I could just see her when I go home and say, I'm not a cop anymore and I don't know how we're going to pay this month's house payment. And she's going to say, you quit your job because of that? Go back there, dummy, and get your job back and strap on your Sam Brown, and you don't need to quit your job. You need to quit being a liar and a hypocrite. And so at that point I go, goody. I said, yay. I went to briefing, and right as soon as I got off a briefing, I went home to see that wife, and I said, hi. And she goes, what are you doing? I said, getting the World Book Encyclopedia that Grandma sold us. She goes, why? And I said, because I'm going to start reading the Constitution. And I kept it with me in my patrol car for the next week or so. And I read the Constitution, and I read the Utah Constitution. And you know what? It was beautiful. And especially the Bill of Rights. And you know the one Bill of Rights that really hit me? Of course the 4th did, and the 5th did, and of course the 1st. But the 8th really hit me. No excessive fines or bail. Do you think that the radar tickets that bring in $7 billion a year are just a little bit excessive? What about it, officer? You know? And so I started to change, and I'm starting to really love all this. And then I'm starting to read about the Founding Fathers, and I read about George Washington, what he did when he went back into, when he crossed the Delaware and went to Valley Forge, and some of his men, one of the captains wrote that some of his men were naked in every sense of the word. This was December 24th that entry was on there. And the only thing they had to eat were fire cakes. That's flour and water cooked over an open fire. That's what a fire cake was. And now everybody's sick. They're freezing. They're starving. They have no weaponry. They have no uniforms. They have no ammo. And they're finally getting to Valley Forge, and they're warming up a little bit. Their backs are to the wall. They're losing the war. So what does our great leader, what does one of the greatest leaders in American history do when your back's to the wall? He attacks. And he gets his men to believe in it. And they go back across the Delaware and back into Trenton and attack the Hessians, who luckily were drunk celebrating Christmas Eve. And they had the best Christmas of their lives. And they took all the boots and supplies from the Hessians, and they had a great Christmas. I'll bet they even had some wine. And they were wonderful. And you see the kind of leadership when you do the impossible. And I'm asking you to consider following and emulating the Founding Fathers as we stand for freedom today. We must do what they did. Stand for freedom today. And pledge to each other our lives and fortunes and sacred honor in doing so. And make sure that it is just that, our sacred honor. And I'm reading about John Adams. And you know who I believe invented the saying, behind every great man stands a great woman? Abigail Adams. She was miraculous. Do you know that she was touched? Her heart was touched by the hand of God. I know it. She knew what her husband was about. She knew he was working for us today. And even when she had a stillborn child, she would not call him home. She would not allow him to leave his post. And they were separated for about 3 years during the war. And she would not have it any other way. We owe her a great deal. We owe all the founders, mothers and fathers, a great deal. Well, while I'm studying this, another miracle happens to me. I'm walking down in the briefing room, and there's a post. Peace Officer Standards and Training is announcing a training seminar entitled Constitutional Studies for Law Enforcement Officers.